Thank you very much. The African continent has, in recent months, seen a second wave of the COVID pandemic, which has been slightly more virulent than the last one. And because of that, everything from PPEs to vaccines have really risen to the top of the priority, both in terms of healthcare and as well as the socioeconomic impacts. The number of doses of COVID vaccines required across the African continent is really vast. With some estimates are that the continent requires 1.6 billion doses. So every additional help the continent could get really makes a lot of sense. In this context, the deliveries to Equatorial Guinea and now Zimbabwe are significant because they demonstrate not just the importance of the vaccination regime, but they also highlight the fact that for Africa, this is going to be a partnership with a broad range of stakeholders and bilateral and multilateral partners, definitely including China.
Raymond, despite the urgent need, Africa really appears to be at the back of the queue in procuring vaccines. What are the barriers? Is it mainly financial?
Yes, I think that there are a number of issues, and these issues are raised in the Africa CDC's Africa COVID Vaccine Development and Access Strategy. First, there's the fact that African countries have not been involved in the clinical development. And unless and until this is done, we cannot be 100% sure that the vaccines are fit for purpose in an African environment. The second is affordability and access. I mentioned earlier the number of doses required. If we subtract the amount of doses that the CDC has been able to identify to date, the cost of the difference for Africa as a whole is between 10 and $15 billion every year. And so access and affordability are really important. And then you also have to have the barriers to delivery and uptake. Quite a few of the vaccines require very specific protocols that need logistical arrangements that most African countries either cannot afford or don't have the facilities or the technical capacity to deliver. And as far as the uptake is concerned, while most Africans are willing to take a vaccine, there's always a psychological issue of, is this as safe as we are being told?
Right.
And being able to overcome those barriers really would be the difference between the vaccines being effective and them not being effective.
Raymond, we have about just half a minute left. The African CDC says it's aiming for a 60% vaccination rate over the next 2 to 3 years. Quickly, how do you see Chinese vaccines playing a role in this?
Chinese vaccines would definitely play a role because globally, African countries are finding it difficult to afford or access supplies of the more popular versions that we see on the news every year. A recent McKinsey study showed that Africa at the moment is sourcing its vaccines primarily from India and Europe. So having other sources would definitely be a help.
Raymond Gilpin, Chief Economist for the United Nations Development Programme Africa, thank you so much for your insight.